The gym buzzed with its usual energy on a Tuesday evening. The scent of sweat and disinfectant hung in the air, mixed with the faint thud of gloves striking heavy bags and the rhythmic slap of bare feet against the polished mats. Music played low from a speaker in the corner, drowned out now and then by the sharp bark of an instructor correcting a student's form. The large mirrors reflected rows of eager faces, flushed and determined, working hard to match the standard of discipline this place demanded. At the center of it all was Ethan, the gym's star instructor and a proud black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He moved with the confidence of a man who believed the mat was his kingdom. Years of training had made his body powerful, his mind sharp, and his ego inflated. To his students, he was a symbol of mastery, one who could take them from clumsy beginners to disciplined warriors. But those who knew him well also knew that Ethan carried an arrogance, a certain way of looking down on those he thought unworthy of stepping into his world. Tonight was no different. Surrounded by a group of intermediate students, he was demonstrating a takedown. His hands moved swiftly, his instructions crisp, and when he slammed his sparring partner onto the mat with a resounding thud, the students gasped and clapped with admiration. Ethan straightened, grinning smugly. See, technique always wins. Strength fades, but skill lasts. He flexed his wrists, as if even his body language was a lesson. It was then that his eyes wandered toward the far corner of the gym, where Rosa was sweeping. She came almost every evening, arriving quietly with her mop, her bucket, and her quiet humility. In her late 40s, with streaks of gray running through her dark hair, she didn't look like anyone who belonged in a place filled with sweat and glory. Her uniform was faded, the soles of her shoes worn thin. She moved about silently, never disturbing anyone, always careful to clean around the edges of the mat once the training ended. To most, she was invisible, just the cleaning lady, a necessary figure who tidied up after others, nothing more. But tonight, Ethan noticed her, and a mischievous idea sparked in his mind. "Hey Rosa," he called out loudly, his voice cutting through the chatter. The students turned, curious, their eyes landing on the woman in the corner. She paused, leaning slightly on her mop, looking at him with patient eyes. "Yes?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. Ethan smirked, waving a hand as if making a joke. "You wanna spar with me? Show us your moves." He chuckled, and a ripple of laughter spread through the students. Some covered their mouths, others openly giggled, imagining the absurdity of a cleaning lady stepping onto the mats to face their skilled black belt instructor. Rosa tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. She didn't blush or frown. She simply studied him for a moment, as if weighing something deeper than his words. The room quieted in anticipation of her response. "Are you sure you want me to?" she asked finally. Her tone wasn't defensive, wasn't hurt. It was calm, almost amused, as though she were the one testing him. The gym erupted into fresh laughter. The students couldn't believe she had answered in such a way. Some nudged each other, whispering about how ridiculous it was. Ethan grinned wider, puffing his chest like a man entertaining his crowd. "Come on," he said, beckoning her with exaggerated gestures. "It'll be fun. Don't be shy, I promise I'll go easy." The students chuckled again, eager to see what would happen next. They expected Rosa to laugh it off, to shake her head and go back to her mop. That was what always happened when people like her were pulled into the spotlight, they bowed out. Reminded of their place. But Rosa didn't do that. Instead, she set her mop gently against the wall. Slowly, with deliberate care, she untied the apron from around her waist, folded it neatly, and placed it beside her cleaning supplies. Then, without saying a word, she stepped out of her worn sneakers and walked barefoot toward the mat. The laughter faltered. There was something in the way she moved, a certain balance, a quiet grace. It wasn't just that she was willing to play along. It was the way her steps seemed practiced, controlled, as though she wasn't entirely unfamiliar with the world she was about to step into. Ethan noticed it too, though he shrugged it off, determined not to let doubt creep in. "You're serious?" he asked, chuckling but with a slight edge of uncertainty. Rosa gave a small smile, bowing her head politely, the way martial artists did before a fight. "You asked," she said simply. Ethan raised his eyebrows, then looked around at his students, who were now silent with anticipation, leaning forward to catch every detail. This was no longer a harmless joke, it was about to become a spectacle. Ethan cracked his knuckles, rolling his shoulders as he stepped into stance. "All right then," he said, his grin returning. "Let's make this quick." The students whispered among themselves, the air buzzing with curiosity. Some pulled out their phones to record what they thought would be an easy victory for their instructor. Others sat with wide eyes, not sure what to expect anymore. Rosa, however, looked unbothered. Her body relaxed but poised, her eyes fixed on Ethan with a focus that unsettled him more than he cared to admit. For a moment, time seemed to stretch. The gym fell into an uneasy hush, broken only by the hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant thud of someone striking a heavy bag across the room. Ethan smirked, confident that whatever happened next would entertain his students and remind everyone why he was the one wearing the black belt. But Rosa, quiet Rosa, stood barefoot on the mat, bowing with a respect that felt ancient, her small smile carrying a secret none of them could guess. And though Ethan didn't yet know it, the next few minutes would shatter his arrogance, silence the entire gym, and leave every single person in that room questioning everything they thought they knew about the woman who mopped their floors. Ethan circled Rosa with an easy grin, his movements casual, almost playful, as though this was no more than a game. His students watched closely, some smiling in anticipation, others whispering among themselves, ready to see their black belt instructor prove himself against someone they all believed to be far beneath his level. "Ready?" Ethan asked, his voice carrying confidence. Rosa nodded once, her face calm, her hands loosely raised in a position that wasn't quite defensive, but not careless either. It was the stance of someone who had stood on mats before, someone who understood rhythm and timing far better than she cared to show. Ethan lunged forward suddenly, reaching for her wrist to pull her into a quick hold. He expected her to flinch, to stumble, to lose balance the way untrained people always did when pressured. But Rosa didn't flinch. With a smooth step to the side, she let his hand miss her entirely. She pivoted gracefully, her movement light and fluid, and before he knew it, his momentum carried him forward awkwardly. The students gasped and laughed nervously at the sight of their instructor almost tripping. Ethan straightened quickly, embarrassed but unfazed. "All right," he muttered with a smirk, trying to shake it off. Beginner's luck. He tried again, faster this time, going for a sweeping grab at her legs. But Rosa was already moving before his attempt. Connected. She twisted her body, dropped low, and with a sudden controlled kick, swept his supporting foot from under him. Ethan landed flat on his back with a loud thud that echoed through the gym. The room went silent. For a moment, no one breathed. Then a ripple of murmurs broke out. Some students chuckled nervously, others stared wide-eyed, phones recording every second. Ethan pushed himself up quickly, his face flushed red, a mixture of shock and humiliation burning in his eyes. He forced a laugh. Okay, not bad. Didn't think you had that in you." He tried to sound amused, but his pride was cracking. He squared his shoulders and settled into a more serious stance this time. No more games. The tension in the room shifted. The students sensed the change in their instructor. Ethan was no longer joking, he wanted to prove himself. He lunged again, his strikes sharper, his grip firmer. But every move he made, Rosa seemed to read it before it even happened. She sidestepped his attacks with a grace that defied her age, countering with small but precise touches that unbalanced him again and again. Ethan grew frustrated. He feinted left and then dove right, aiming to pin her down. But Rosa moved like water, her body flowing past his weight, redirecting his energy instead of fighting it. In one swift motion, she slipped behind him, caught his arm, and twisted it into a hold so tight and controlled that he froze in shock. His body locked, his face pressed close to the mat as her quiet voice cut through the stunned silence. "Tap," she said gently. He hesitated, his pride refusing. Then pain shot through his arm, sharp and unrelenting. With no other choice, he tapped the mat furiously. The sound echoed like a drumbeat. Gasps erupted from the students. Phones recorded everything. Their black belt instructor, the man they admired, had just tapped out, defeated by the woman who scrubbed their floors every evening. Rosa released him immediately, stepping back with the same calm expression she had worn from the beginning. She didn't gloat, she didn't smirk, she simply straightened her uniform and waited. Ethan rose slowly, breathing hard, his face red with both exertion and humiliation. He avoided his students' eyes, but he could feel them on him, shocked, disbelieving, questioning everything. He swallowed hard. Who are you?" he asked, his voice quieter this time, stripped of arrogance. Rosa tilted her head, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I used to train," she said softly. "Back home, a long time ago. I was on the national team once. Life changed, and I stopped competing. But training stays with you. Your body remembers what your mind forgets. The students stared at her as though seeing her for the first time. Their jaws hung open, their laughter gone. Even the faint sound of the music playing in the background seemed out of place, drowned by the weight of what had just been revealed. Ethan blinked at her, stunned. You were a fighter. Rosa smiled faintly. Yes, before life became about surviving. Now I clean. But skill doesn't disappear just because your uniform changes. The silence that followed was heavy. Ethan lowered his gaze, shame tightening his chest. For the first time in years, he felt small, humbled, his ego crushed not by a stronger man, but by a woman everyone, including him, had underestimated. He bowed his head slightly, the only gesture he could think of to show respect. I'm sorry, he murmured. I shouldn't have mocked you. I thought. Rosa lifted a hand, cutting him off gently. It's fine. You wanted to test me, and now you know. Remember this. Never judge someone by their job, their clothes, or their silence. Strength hides in many places. She walked calmly off the mat, slipping her worn sneakers back on, tying her apron around her waist, and picking up her mop once more. She didn't linger to enjoy the stunned looks or the hushed whispers. To her, this wasn't about proving anything, it was simply a reminder, delivered with grace and dignity. But for everyone else in the gym, it was unforgettable. Ethan stood frozen, his pride shattered, while his students exchanged glances of awe and disbelief. None of them laughed now. None of them dared to make another joke at Rosa's expense. From that day forward, every time she entered the gym with her mop and bucket, the students straightened their backs and greeted her with a quiet respect. They whispered stories about her skill, replayed the video recordings again and again, and marveled at the secret she had kept hidden in plain sight. And Ethan, once the loudest and proudest in the room, never forgot the lesson etched into his memory that night: true strength doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits quietly in the corner, sweeping floors, until someone foolish enough dares it to rise.